Chabad, and as you can see, this is an interactive, in-person as well as virtual class, and just getting everything together. As long as you can see, if anyone has any comments or commentary. Okay, can you see the background? We have the PowerPoint slides, and we are going to now continue our discussion. And yesterday we concluded with talking about how the soul is divided into two categories. There's the seichel, which is our intelligence, and there is midos, which is our emotions. Now, the way we usually function, the seichel, our mind, is the one that influences the midos, our emotions. And how we understand something informs how we feel about it. And that is ideal, that our mind should be in control of our feelings, not the other way around, because when it is the other way around, unfortunately, it can get tricky. It can become problematic because our emotions are, if you're just driven by feelings, that's not the ideal way we want it to be. Now, yesterday I mentioned that there are three garments of the soul. What are the garments of the soul? Okay, that's the mode of expression, our active consciousness. So the soul has these three outlets or interfaces that it functions with. Are you all familiar? What are sorry, I'm going to have to mute. Ladies and gents, if you don't mind to mute yourselves. Okay, I will have to mute you if you can't mute yourself. There we are. Thank you. You can unmute yourself if you have any questions. Feel free to do so. So, again, the question we asked a moment ago, what are the three garments of the soul? What are its expressions? Right? Just as a person wears a suit, and the suit gives you expression, the clothing you wear have an impact on who you are. They have a manifestation, an expression. They give you character. What do they say? The suit makes the man. Isn't there an expression? The clothing make the man. Is that a Madison Avenue line, or is it also a mystical line? And perhaps we could say that as well. But just as we say that your clothing can be changed, right? If you have a stain, if you dirtied your clothes, you can change them. Likewise, we say that the clothing of the soul, if they get sullied, if they can also be changed, and that's very important. So what are the garments of your soul? Have you ever given this thought? Well, take a look at the screen. Let's put it up here. The first one is called machshava. What's machshava? Thinking, our thought. Very good. The second one is called dibur. Dibur is speech. And the third one is called maisa, which is our action, our behavior. Now, we call these domains the levushim, the garments of the soul, because as opposed to the body, which is actually you, garments are things that we could put on and things we could take off. During the height of COVID, when I would respond to any Hatzalah calls, we called it donning and duffing, right? You had to put on the hazmat suit and take it off as you were going on to see patients, and wanted to be very careful not to transmit any COVID or not to in any way catch it. So in Tehillim, there's a verse that says, let me just recall which verse of Tehillim I'm talking about. Hold on a second. At my age, we forget which verse of Tehillim I'm referring to. There's a verse in Tehillim I want to quote to you. Come on, we just said it in the day for Tehillim the other day. It's in Kuf Beis, and let me just find it. The verse says, Kuf Beis. Here we go. V'chulam kabeged yivlu. which means like clothing, you could change them. Kalavush tachlifem v'yachlofu, and they will be discarded. You could change, meaning our midos are certain. Let's not talk about characteristics. We're talking here about our garments of the soul. Now, yes, my thoughts could sometimes be inappropriate, and maybe sometimes I could say things that aren't right. But what are we saying here? Like this verse in Tehillim says, like clothing, you will change them and they will be discarded. Says Chassidus, very important thought, Machshava, Dibur, Maisar, thought, speech, and action, Heim levushim hanifradim. They are like garments that are separate from us. She'enam shaychim klal hanefesh. They are not the core of our soul itself, but just like the clothing that I wear, that I could switch from a suit to casual to whatever I want. Lachein yesh b'hem hefsek. Therefore, there's a distinction. Kamay hadibur. Let's take speech as an example. What does King Solomon say in Mishlei and Proverbs? Eis lachashov ve'eis ledaber. There's a time to think and there's a time to speak. Right? There's a whole expression there in Proverbs where King Solomon says, La kol zman ve'et. For everything there's a time and place. Et milchama ve'et shalom. There's a time for war. There's a time for peace. Say that again in English. There's a time to plant and there's a time to reap. And by the way, I'm always reminded of a profound little thought from the Malbim. The Malbim was a commentator, and he once had a visitor came to his town. This guy was a Magid, a preacher. Yeah, once upon a time it was very common. Even today, you want to go, what is every shul doing, trying to get a different speaker onto Zoom. In fact, yesterday somebody said to me, I have a very good speaker to come for your Chabad Seniors program. I said, I thought they'd come for me. Now they're coming for others. Anyways, he says, I got a preacher for you. So once upon a time, this preacher called a Magid, he came to town and he spoke and spoke and spoke. So afterwards, the Malbim says, for each of these items that King Solomon says, a time for war and a time for peace, there's an in-between. Take, for example, a few weeks ago, Ukraine and Russia were not at peace, but they weren't yet at war. Right? There's an in-between. Yeah, there was something. Now they're at war. They weren't at peace, but there's this in-between moment, right? He says then, sometimes you're not plowing and you're not reaping. There's a time to laugh and a time to cry. Is there not an in-between? There's sometimes you're not laughing, you're not crying. But this one where it says, there's a time to speak and a time to be quiet. What's the in-between? Either you're quiet or you're speaking. What's in between? So now that this Magid, this preacher came and spoke, he said in Yiddish, Gerät und gerät, aber gar nicht gesagt. You know what that means? Spoke, but said nothing. Do you ever feel like that's me? We're getting a little personal here. So it says, V'gam hamachshava, when you think about thought, He kalavush tachlifem v'yachlofu, this verse in Tehillim that I just read for you. Kalavush tachlifem v'yachlofu, which means that like clothing, that you could change them and they could be discarded. So what happens? A person was out there and getting stuck in the mud and getting all dirty. Guess what you could do? Take off those clothes. Go back to the COVID example. When I would respond to Hatzalah calls in the early days of COVID, before I took my break, so you would go to a call, and we were scared. We had no clue what this COVID is all about. So we would have to take off our clothes. Luckily, I have a vestibule when you come into my house. I'm able to change outside, even though it was like wintertime. Remember, lockdown started in March. March is still summer here. But we didn't really have much COVID cases till June, July. That's when it hit in and came with a vengeance. So that's winter here. And my shifts are usually at night. Come back at night, freezing, and changing my clothes outside, putting it all straight into a garbage bag. We didn't even have a maid then. I used to ask Temba here to come help me clean up at home. We would do all our laundry ourselves or anything. For a few months, there was no domestic help. Everyone was scared of COVID. So we had to do it all ourselves. And I put it into a garbage bag. And then, like touching it with gloves, putting it straight into the washing machine because we were scared. We didn't know what's going on. Okay, we've advanced a little bit. Now, keep one mask in each pocket just in case you come across the right person. You know, some places I go, nobody's wearing masks. In other places, they want you to wear 4 masks. It's not enough. Anyways, you can change it. And that is the important message here about the garments of the soul. Your intelligence and emotions are you. That's part and parcel of you yourself. But your thoughts, your speech, your action are ways in which you express yourself. That's the difference. These are the expressions of yourself. Again, your intelligence and emotions, that's part of you. It's your mind and your brain and your heart. Right? So your intelligence and emotions, that's part and parcel of who you are. But what you do with your mind, what you think, what you feel with your heart, what you say, those are the expressions of your brain and heart that are you. Everyone understand? So I want you to picture 10 attributes like applications on your smartphone. You have your phone, and on your phone you have all types of applications. Okay, they are downloaded on the phone, they take up storage space, but you don't do anything without an operating system to function on. You need the phone. So there's the phone itself, and then there are the apps that you have on the phone. All these apps are like the thought, speech, and action. The brain and heart are like the phone itself, if that's a good way to express it, right? You have to open your phone, you have to press the screen in order to activate the app, in order to use it. So the app is an expression. The garments are the display, the operating interface of your phone. Now our soul powers are only active on the interfaces of thought, speech, or action, and they have to be activated by one of them in order to function. So yes, you have a brain, but your brain is expressed through the thoughts that it has. Your heart, yes, your heart is an anatomical part of your body, of your path of, your entire existence. But your feelings are the expression of the heart. Too simplistic? What do you think? Huh? And if you want, you could take out your phones. Let's try this out, for example. Right? Take out your phones and open, let's say, your email application. Okay? You could open your email right here. And then I want you to think about the relationship between the kochot and the levushim, meaning you have the actual phone, but then you have the expression. Through your phone, you're able to use your email. Without the phone, what's the email? Right? You can't think without a brain. You can't feel without a pulsating heart. So you obviously need these, and that's, I don't know if I'm expressing it best, but when you're busy analyzing something right now, you're looking at your phone, you're checking your apps, it means that your thought is being accessed by one of the intellectual powers and is enabling that power to enter an activated state. So yes, your brain is constantly there, but unless you're thinking, you're not applying it. Verstehst? So the phone is lying dormant unless you actually open the app, and now you're using the garments. At that moment, the other soul attributes maybe are I don't know what they're doing. When you're busy agonizing over something, an emotional faculty is being activated. Your heart is not just being present, right? Yeah, what's your heart doing all day? It's circulating blood, it's keeping you alive. True. But you're activating it when you are feeling something. True? Make sense? Now, let's try to think about this idea. My brain is working. Okay, what happens? I have an idea, maybe an event, right, that I'm thinking about. Then my brain starts to process it. I understand that idea. I start judging and assessing and working on it. Now what happens? I have to also have feelings. So the mind and the heart have to connect, which is part of the idea of wearing the head and hand tefillin, is connecting, synchronizing my brain and my heart. Now what I would like to do with you now, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to, somebody could close the lights here, and I want you to look at the screen, and we're going to watch a video, let's just make sure it works, of this very idea of how this process works. What's going on? What happened to our sound here?
Thoughts produce feelings. Therefore, even a microsecond of thought in any situation produces an emotion. If we have negative emotions, we can simply displace them by replacing them with a new thought. Not a difficult process, and let me share with you a meditation to try to carry out that particular function. So gently close your eyes and just become aware of the flow of your thoughts. What thoughts are flowing through onto the screen of your consciousness? And as you become aware of the thought, see if you can identify a feeling that arises as a consequence of that thought. I would like you to take yourself back to a moment, to a time when you might have been embarrassed, a situation of personal embarrassment. Try to locate that particular incident, refreshing it in your mind. Note all the points that cause the embarrassment. Become aware of the people who are present. And become acutely aware of your feelings of embarrassment at that time. And now, let's switch that thought. I want you to think back to a moment when you were supremely happy, ecstatic, somewhere in your life where you felt absolute joy. Recall that moment. Where were you? Who was there? Can you recall the voices, the colors, the background sounds? And now consider, where did that image of embarrassment of a few moments ago disappear? The feelings went away because New thoughts were brought into the consciousness of your mind. Let's try that again. Now think back to a time where you hurt yourself physically, maybe injured yourself, sprained an ankle. Take yourself back there and feel the pain. Simulate it. Recognize how you felt. Even complex feelings beyond the pain, consequences. And now turn your mind to a birthday party in your honor that you may have experienced as a child, as an adult. What is going on at the party? Who is there? Singing. Maybe a cake. Maybe candles. How do you feel? That same happiness has been recreated. What happened to that feeling of hurt and pain of a few moments ago when you hurt yourself back then? You changed your thoughts, and therefore your feelings changed. Let's learn an important lesson. Moach shalit al halev. The mind determines the outcomes of the emotions. Change your mind, and you change your feelings. When feeling down, depressed, change your thoughts. And in so doing, your whole emotional makeup transforms in the same moment.
Okay, ladies and gents, hope you enjoyed that little meditation, and I hope you had the opportunity to apply your thought, your mind, and become aware of each of the parts in this process, as you just heard with Rabbi Leibel Wolf from Australia, who's a renowned mystical meditation guru and a rabbi. And we'll certainly look at some aspects and ideas of meditation from a Jewish perspective, as you're already seeing. But the first idea I wanted to express today is the levushim, the three garments of the soul. And that is the way the soul expresses itself. Just like when you want to express yourself through your own clothing, these garments are the backdrop of the soul's operation. And with that in mind, being aware of the process that produced our negative feelings, as the rabbi mentioned, that permits us to identify methods of taming them. Being aware of it allows us to tame it. Is there a question that somebody has? It's quite disturbing, the sound that's coming through. Please keep yourselves muted. Who's unmuted? Somebody here is unmuted and making a ruckus. Gail, if you don't mind to keep yourself muted, thank you. All right. Unless you have a question. If you have a question, then feel free to unmute yourself. So being aware of that process is what helps you to identify what it is, right? Now, the simplest method is to pull out the rug from under these feelings by shifting our thoughts to something positive. So what's causing you to have a negative thought? He mentioned it. You broke an ankle. You remember an incident, an event, an occurrence, something negative that happened. Can you shift your mind to think of something positive instead? Now, firstly, depriving our intellectual attention of negativity prevents our mental judgments from developing the funnel clouds of negative emotion. Secondly, we can actively insert a positive focus in its place. It's sort of, you're moving into a house, you might want to clean up the dirt before moving in the nice new furniture. Or, I'll tell you, if you bring nice, new, brand new, beautiful furniture into the house, you say, how could such a beautiful house with such a fancy chandelier and these comfortable leather couches and these beautiful, fine furnishings be such a mess? Let's move it out. So by bringing the positive thoughts in, hopefully you could negate and eliminate the negativity that's there. And that is where I want to go with you now, because using the model of consciousness, we can identify 3 elements in the process of unwanted feeling. Okay? And for that, I have to give you a slide that will hopefully demonstrate the ideas that I'm going to express here. First of all, the emotional self. Okay, here we go. We're going to go into this and understand it. We have the emotional self. We have the understanding that gave birth to the emotion. Yes, you have a mind. Your mind processes and rationalizes. So there is an understanding that gave birth to your emotion, to the feelings. Now, the garment that facilitated this process is what? Your thought, machshava. So the brain is always there. What are you doing with your brain? Machshava means that you are processing it. So it's a garment, it's external. Just as you could have a negative thought, just as I could wear schlumpy, dirty clothes, I can change to put on nice, clean clothing. I could change my negative thoughts into positive ones. So now we can try to combat the negative feelings head on the emotional or the intellectual level, both. Now, of course, despite having strong reasons to feel a certain way for whatever reason, try to control your emotional response. Is it easy? Never said so. But that's why the tool is to use your mind to control your emotions rather than your emotions controlling your mind. Because if you're always following your emotions, that's very instinctive behavior. That's not healthy. Animals do exactly that. Animals want to eat, they'll go for the kill right now. Animals want to be intimate, doesn't matter. I'm going to do what I want, the way I want, where I want, how I want, when I want. But you're a human. A human is superior to an animal in certain ways. So try to shift your understanding. That's why I say it's both the emotions and the intellect. Try to reframe your judgment so that it doesn't lead to a negative emotional response. It's in your mind. Your mind can control your emotions. Again, not saying it's easy, but if you work on it, then this is a process that can be successful. So instead of, I know intuitively maybe I'm thinking one way, and this is extremely challenging. It can often require a lifetime of effort to overcome all my negativity, which is why so many of us are still struggling, myself included. We struggle with this, but this is part of the avodah of our mission and divine service of what we're here for in this world. We just celebrated a beautiful bris this morning here of a baby from our community. Avraham Yosef de Miranda. Right? Well, Lisa gave birth to her son last week on the 22/2/22. Special birthday. And childbirth is called labor. Adam la'amal yulad. King Solomon tells us there are a lot of profound proverbs from him. And he says, man is born to toil. It's part of our process, not just talking about physically working laboriously. We're talking about the process of working on ourselves, on our spiritual development and growth. Right? It takes Herculean strength and effort to shift your understanding and judgment. It takes incredible discipline to be able to diffuse those justifiable emotions that we might have. And if you've studied Tanya, we know that the process of being a Beinoni, the ideal, there's 5 types of people described in Tanya. Tanya says there's 5 types of people. On the higher spectrum, we have Tzaddik V'Tovlo. That's the perfect human being. All right, is a real, full, perfect, ideal human. To tell you the truth, those are far and few in between. Okay, that's a Moses, that's a patriarch, matriarch. Right? This is not everyone. But, by the way, some of the great, great personalities, not like they didn't have shortcomings and sins. Why does the Torah tell us about King David's stories, incidents, right? Episodes, anecdotes of his personal failures? I think it's showing us how possible it is that even the greatest people can fall, can fail, and yet they can succeed, and he can become the greatest, most righteous person. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah tells us about his, and even Avraham and Sarah, they weren't born as the patriarchs and matriarchs of the Jewish people. Avraham and Sarah started off on a life of idol worship. Right? Sarah was Abraham's niece. And they are our great ancestors. Why is Avram and Sarah our great ancestors? Why are they the patriarch or matriarch of the Jewish people? Why not Adam and Eve? If Adam and Eve were the first people ever created, what about Noah and his wife, Naomi?
Because Abraham and Sarah took Judaism to another level.
Absolutely. They founded the Jewish nation. They brought that idea of monotheism to the world. So yes, Adam and Eve are the founding father and mother of all of humanity. But it's Avraham and Sarah who became the founding father and mother, the patriarch and matriarch of the Jewish people. Why? Because it's not that they didn't have struggles. It's not that they were perfect. But they realized that through this effort, how perfect they can become. The second type of person, we talk about Tzaddik Viralo. Tzaddik Viralo is, again, a great ideal. It's a very righteous person. A man or woman that has really worked on themselves. Now, the Tzaddik V'Tovla is completely good. They've completely obliterated, eliminated any vestige of evil within them. As human beings, we have a Yetzer Tov, we have a Yetzer Hara, a good inclination and an evil inclination. It's the way God made us. The greatest tzaddik, the most righteous people, they have completely eliminated their evil inclination. The next level is a very righteous person who still has Virala, they still have a Yetzer Hara, they still have an evil inclination, but it's like non-existent. Like non-existent. They don't give in to it. They don't capitulate and concede to its whims. Now the truth is the Beinoni, the next person that we're talking about here, also has struggles and challenges every single day. And this person, the Beinoni, every day going through their struggles and challenges and facing obstacles, nevertheless, they overcome them every single day, no matter what those challenges might be. Now that is an ideal we want to get to. And yes, it says, Ein tzaddik asher yaseh tov aleyachta. I don't know the source, I have to remember where it's from, but it's certainly, I say it in the funeral, at every funeral. I just don't remember if it's from King Solomon or King David, if it's from Tehillim. Is a Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. But the point is, there's no righteous person who never sinned. The greatest, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah tells us. Now, what was for Moshe a sin? For him it was a sin striking the rock instead of talking to it. That's his sin. It's incomparable to us, because the greater you are, the higher the expectations are of you. Absolutely. But the idea that the Beinoni described in Tanya, I'm not going to go to the evil people, because Tanya is a book about the Beinoni. That's really what I want to talk about. Even amongst evil people, there's 2 levels. There's a Hitler, a Stalin. I don't know if Putin has to go into that category now. Well, I don't know where Mugabe stands in this. Right? There's some people who are completely, inherently evil. That's the lowest level of the barrel. That's Russia Viralo. That's the most evil, abhorrent people. But to tell you the truth, most human beings will go in the category just above that. Russia V'Tovla, Because it sounds like the average person is the Beinoni. The Beinoni, but what the Tanya describes the Beinoni like is a person who has struggles but doesn't concede, doesn't capitulate, doesn't give in to them. So most people will go into the lower category. Halavai. We're striving to be a Beinoni. That's the thing in the Gemara. It says, Rabbah, one of the great Talmudic sages, could go on a Beinoni. He says, I'm an example of a Beinoni, about himself. And some of his colleagues said to him, if you say that, then what are we? If you're a Beinoni, Beinoni means average. If you're the average, then what are we? And Tanya tells us the Beinoni is a very high level. And therefore most people, as long as I'm, behaving in a way that gives in to my negative emotions, I'm not the Beinoni or the Tzaddik. But nevertheless, and Tanya discusses that the Beinoni, who may never be able to win over their seichel and midas of the nefesh habahamis, meaning of our animal soul, but the Beinoni has the ability to control what? Machshava. I might have an evil inclination, and my evil inclination might be tempting me and inciting me to do all types of things. This isn't a therapy session. You don't have to tell us what your evil inclination gets excited about. I'm not asking anybody to share that information. That's between you and yourself. But, nevertheless, the garments of your soul, machshava, dibur, maaseh, your thought, speech, and action, you can control despite what temptations you face throughout the day. So despite this, the Beinoni should still strive to work on their seichel and midas to the best of their ability. How can I channel my thoughts to be more positive? How can I eliminate those negative thoughts? Beinoni is a normal human being. But you know what the Beinoni does? Says, I'm not going to give in to my negativity. I'm going to switch the channel. Now, you have channels in your TV, you have channels in your mind. Switch the channel. And in the long run, a person should endeavor to deal with problems both on the intellectual and emotional levels. Okay, and if it's a chronic issue, see a professional, as I said yesterday. Don't think the problems will just go away. If you need emotional help, seek a therapist. If you need psychological help, talk to a psychologist. Don't just let the issues go. But in the moment when you're feeling an unwanted emotion, it happens. Then what happens? What you could consider is, I don't know if to call it a quick fix, but this is the idea that Hasidus tells us. Try to switch from negativity to positivity. Again, if it's chronic, seek a professional. But if it's not chronic, it's just human. As humans, we sometimes have negative thoughts. Negative, I don't just mean as in negative. Sometimes it could be naughty. Whatever those feelings or thoughts might be. Then, see how you can switch it. Right? A person may never be able to fully overcome every problem and every thought and every feeling. But that is your mission, to try to do that. Why do we get these distractive thoughts? We'll get to that in a moment, because that's human nature. Your mind is constantly thinking, and I bet right now as I'm talking to you, how many of you, I'm just looking around the room, how many are thinking, and I see what's going on, especially those playing on their phones. Right? So, we might not be successful in changing the way we judge every situation, every feeling that we have. We might not be able to overcome every emotion. But the technique that we're discussing, hey, don't run away just because I talk. What are you doing, Malcolm? Where are you running? Hey. This is something everyone could do. This is very important. Okay? Now, of course, there's always problems we have, and we try to get rid of a problem without actually dealing with it head on as we should. You know the story, a woman comes to her rabbi, she pours out her heart, her soul, she goes on all about her problems, the tsaras, left and right, in every direction she's got problems. Anyways, after an hour of speaking, she says, Rabbi, thanks so much for listening to me. Truthfully speaking, my problems haven't disappeared, but at least my headache went away. You know what the rabbi says? He says, your headache didn't travel too far. Now I have it. But a much easier and more accessible way is to combat it at the level, at the thought, and that is what we're going to focus on today. How can I deal with these three emotions? My thoughts, my feelings, right? This is something we're going to discuss because we mentioned that thoughts are garments of the soul and are not the soul itself. Remember, you have a soul. The garments of your soul are your thought, speech, and action. Now, this is an extremely important point because it means that your thoughts aren't you. Remember that. Let me say it again. Okay, this is a point I want you to understand very clearly. Your thoughts are not you. Did it register? Yes? You can absorb them. You could observe your thoughts, right? Like a piece of clothing, you could change them. That's the point we're making. Somebody keeps unmuting themselves. Leo, do you have a question? No? Okay. So remember, you're not the thoughts. Yes, you might have thoughts, but they are garments of the soul. You could change those thoughts. Right? They don't define or control you. They are a behavior, just like your speech and action are behaviors. Okay, you could opt in, you could opt out, you could do what you want. And that's why I need to read to you some words from chapter 12 in Tanya. Okay, so let me read this to you. It says as follows, Ki hamayach shalit al halev. The mind naturally controls the heart. Humans were created from birth with the ability to exercise willpower to control the drives of our hearts so that we're not expressed in our behavior, speech, or thought. We are able to divert our attention completely from things our hearts crave to something entirely different. Okay? And this is known as meta thinking. It's the ability to think about your thoughts. Meta thinking. Meta thinking. Yeah? And if you could think about your thoughts, you can redirect them. Okay? So now you know how you're able to master your thoughts and to change them. How does this help you deal with your feelings? I want to share with you a little story. Pardon? Well, if you have positive thoughts, why do you want to change them? You want to take your negative thoughts and make them into positive, into good thoughts. There's a good story that comes to mind. You guys like a story always? A chassid once came to Rabbi Dov Ber, the Maggid of Mezrich, and he asked for advice. How can I control my thoughts? This is exactly our discussion here. How do we control our thoughts? Now, you would expect, you go to the rabbi, he's going to give you an answer. But oftentimes, rabbis don't answer you directly. How did Rabbi Dov Ber, the Maggid, respond to this student? He sent him, he said, you know what? I want you to go on a trip, and I want you to visit Reb Zev. Reb Zev lived in the town of Zhytomyr, somewhere in the Ukraine, someplace under attack today. Okay, go to Reb Zev. Okay, it was a long, arduous journey. Don't forget the Maggid of Mezrich lived 200 years ago, and there still were no cars yet. Maybe they had more sophisticated wagons. And he's going on this long, arduous journey. We don't know if it was a cold winter night or what the weather was, but it couldn't have been that pleasant back in Russia, Ukraine, Poland in those days through the mud. And he's schlepping zich all the way out there, and he could see through the window shades as he finally arrives at Reb Zev's house. You could see through the windows. Reb Zev is awake. Baruch Hashem, I got to the right house. Right? He asks some people, is this the house of Reb Zev? Yes, that's Reb Zev's house. Huh? Bingo, you got the right place. So what does he do? He starts knocking on the door. He could see through the window. It was open. You don't look, sometimes inevitably you can see through the window. The window shades identify that there's people in the house that are awake. And he's knocking on the door, and he's knocking on the window. Nothing. He's waiting there, he's knocking, and nobody's listening to him. And then he takes a little break. He tries a little harder. Go to another window, another door. Garnish, nobody answering. Harder, harder. He knocks, nothing. Okay, he's completely ignored. And if it was winter, and we could say he was getting colder. If it was summer, maybe, I don't know. But the point is, he didn't know what to do, and he was beginning to not feel very pleasant about this. As the night wore on, he didn't know what to do, and he was banging on the door, garnish geholfen, nobody came, nobody answered. Be it as it may, at some point, I could drag this story on, but there was a bris here this morning, so we'll cut the long story short. Finally, Reb Zev opened the door, and he warmly greeted his visitor. Oh, Shalom Aleichem, welcome to my home. Come inside, I see you're a little cold, sit down by the fireplace. Maybe I could give you a whiskey or a vodka to warm your bones. Maybe a nice hot glass of tea. What would you like? A shtickle cake, something. There was good delicacies. All of you who didn't come here today, you're missing out on the good brunch that we're offering today. And he says, come, let's talk. He welcomes him in. First, the chassid has to warm himself up. And after he's enjoying some of Reb Zev's hospitality, he turns to him and he says, I have to tell you why I came. I came because our teacher, Rabbi Dov Ber, the Maggid, he sent me to your home, that you're going to explain to me how I can control my thoughts, right? So I had this question, and Reb Dov Ber said, go to Reb Zev. I traveled all this way. I don't know how far the distance was, but it was a long journey. Right? So I came to your home. I'm knocking on the door. You don't even answer. Will you at least give me an answer to my question? So Reb Zev says as follows. You see, actually, I did answer you already. What do you mean you answered me already? I just told you my question. Right? He says, no. I gave you the answer at the very moment that you arrived. You see, in my home, I am the boss. Okay? Whoever I want to admit, whoever I want to let in, I will allow through the door. And whoever I did not wish to admit, sorry, no entry. What does it say on all the signs on the shops? No mask, no entry. I decide who comes in. I gave you the answer. Okay? So this man was asking, is a man any less of a master of his own self than he is of his home? No. There's no reason why that should be. You are a master of your home. You are a master of your thoughts. You decide who comes in. You decide who stays out. Bidiyuk. And that's meta thinking. That's the idea that you could think about your thoughts, and hopefully with a little bit of discipline, you can control those thoughts and determine which thoughts you allow to enter and which you do not. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to just take a quick break, and I just need a minute to have a quick drink, and I just want you to take this moment. Yeah, do what you want, okay? All right. Don't all disappear. I'm sorry. Okay, let me ask you, what were you thinking about during that moment that I just took a break? Huh? What were you thinking about? Let's see here. I see that I needed a break. It was really just a part of it. Was just a plot. Huh? Somebody wrote here work. Leo, you want to say something?
Sorry, Rabbi.
Your dog. Why is okay? Somebody was thinking about their dog.
Hello.
Breakfast, all right? Just saying, you feel free to pop a message here to me and what you were thinking about. Your bills. Wow. Okay, I see some good ideas. What were you thinking about, guys?
Sorry,
My
Rabbi.
water. Yeah, Leo?
Um,
Just a second. One of the people on the group online wants to say something. Yeah, Leo?
so, Rabbi,
Yeah, talk up a little louder. We can't hear you.
okay, I agree with everything you say. However, when you say you change your thoughts and change the channels,
Yeah.
you can change your thoughts. However, you can't change the physical thing that you were thinking about. In other words,
It's in the room.
if it's something which is affecting your life, you can change your thoughts, but the physical reason of your thoughts you can't change.
True. Viktor Frankl said you can't control what's beyond your control. I don't remember his exact words, but it was something to do, something to that effect. But his idea was what you can control is how you react to it, how you feel about it, how the thought process. Okay, so as we just saw while I was taking a quick water break, for the most part, our minds have a mind of their own, as you're saying, Leo. Right? We often aren't even aware of our thoughts, especially if there's something in particular that is inflicting a particular feeling, something going on. And in fact, the Gemara tells us that one of the things a person inevitably transgresses every day is called hirur avera. You know what that means? The feelings, the how would you say hirur? The feeling of doing something wrong. Not the feeling, the thought. Right? The Gemara says, Shalash shaveris ein adam nitza mehem. There are three inevitable types of sins that a person transgresses. One of them is hirur avera, iyun tefila, and lashon hara. Right? So one is hirur avera. Sometimes you just have a feeling that's a transgression, even if you don't actually commit it. Another is perhaps during prayer you get distracted. And lashon hara, how often do we wind up talking slanderously, gossip about others? My mother of blessed memory always used to remind me that gossip is like film. It always begins with a negative. It's usually developed and it's sometimes even enlarged. According to recent research, an average person has more than 6,000 thoughts a day. Okay, this was during 2020, during COVID-19. Okay, they were thinking about the brain moves from one thing to the next. And you think about how much access our phone, our phones are constantly. I even read somewhere that a person has 70,000 thoughts a day. Okay, I don't know the sources, but you Google it, you'll see all types of responses. How many thoughts? How many of those can you remember? How many items did you read this morning alone on news going on in Ukraine and Russia? You remember it all? Yeah, you have 70,000 thoughts that you could remember? Of course not. When our thoughts are unconscious, they are tools in the hands of our minds and our hearts, our experiences, maybe our personality, and many other factors unconsciously shape our judgment, which automatically produces feelings and reactions, all of which are projected subconsciously in our thinking. And that's why we react to things in ways that are beyond our control. That's where Viktor Frankl says, what you're telling us, Leo. There are certain things that are beyond your control. But thought doesn't have to be unconscious. Yes, you have your unconscious thoughts. We have the ability to think deliberately. That's the point I'm trying to tell you. Maybe while I was taking my sip of water, you were unconsciously thinking. And by now you don't remember what you were thinking of, except for the people who said they were thinking about their dog and breakfast and their bills. Or my water, as you said. But our mind unconsciously is thinking all the time. What I'm trying to get at is by intentionally controlling our thoughts, we reverse the process of the soul's consciousness. We use thought to shift the focus of our mind and heart. That is meta thinking. That is focus thinking. Right? When we choose what we think, we control our mind processes and what emotions are going to flow from there. If we cut off a negative thought, the negative feeling that was associated with it will dissipate. Trust me. And although it doesn't deal with the issue itself, as you're saying, there are issues in life, but listen to this, Leo. Controlling your thoughts can cut off the internal processing of the issue, which alleviates the negative feelings that is induced by whatever situation. So yes, it's true. Life sends us in all directions and we might be facing all types of challenges and obstacles. There is no doubt about that. But can you control it? Let me even tell you something. I got something here that you would think fits more into meditations that are outside the spectrum of Judaism. But let me share with you something. Because one way of becoming more aware of your thoughts is by focusing on your breath. Did you know that? Breathing exercises, I know they're very popular and they're very, and guess what? Jewish meditation, in Kabbalah, it talks a lot about breathing techniques. It's not just in yoga classes. Jewish thought tells us, especially Kabbalah, it tells us about breathing techniques. And simply noticing our breath, it's actually very beneficial. Okay? And it can be channeled to help with a meditation, with mindfulness, with helping you to move from a negative space to a positive space. And of course, if you could practice breathing, that's a very relaxing process. Focusing on the breath is a tool to becoming more conscious of our thoughts. Let me read this to you from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. Everyone familiar with Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan? Just want to read to you. He wrote a book called Jewish Meditation, and very appropriate for what we're discussing. He wrote the Living Torah, that's right, that's the popular Chumash in this shul. Let me just, I know it's a little bit long, I just want to read to you a few paragraphs from his book. This is very beginning of the book, page 5 and 6, in the book called Jewish Meditation by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. And he says here as follows: this explains why so many disciplines use breathing exercises as a meditative device. Breathing usually occurs automatically and is therefore normally under the control of the unconscious mind. Unless you are consciously controlling your breathing, it will mirror your unconscious mood. This is one reason why breathing is one of the indicators in a lie detector test. Yet, if you wish, you can control your breath and do so quite easily. Breathing therefore forms a link between the conscious mind and the unconscious. By learning how to concentrate on and control your breath, you can go on to learn how to control the unconscious mind. One learns to use the conscious mind to control mental processes that are usually under the control of the unconscious. Gradually, more and more of the subconscious becomes accessible to the conscious mind, and one gains control of the entire thought process. Okay, he goes on here for a lot more, but the point he's saying is that our breath is similar to our thoughts. Right? It's usually done unconsciously, just like you were thinking unconsciously. But it can be controlled deliberately. You can, right? Think about it. Right now you're breathing. If you weren't breathing, you would be dead. True?
Yep.
But when we actively control our breathing, we take the reins of what is usually unconscious. And in fact, the Medrash makes a connection between, what's the Hebrew word for soul? Actually, there's 5 Hebrew words, but the main word that people usually use, neshama. Neshama is very similar to the word neshima. What's neshima? Neshima. Kol neshima, neshima, which means every breath. So neshima means breath, neshama means soul. You see the relationship? You see the connection? Yeah, fascinating, okay? In fact, when we say in davening every morning, Kol neshama tahalel ka halalu, right? We say that in davening, says the Gemara, the words of the Gemara, Al kol neshima o neshima sha'adam noshem, for every single breath that a person breathes, tzarich lekalis levarech, has to be grateful to Hashem. My timer, what's the reason? The Gemara asks, and the Gemara answers, Kol neshama talech, just as every soul praises God, for kol neshima, for every breath you have, thank God. How do you like that? And you could see this universally in many languages. Right? For example, the word spirit. What does the word spirit mean? What's a spirit? In the Latin, spirit means your breath, to breathe. Okay? Spirited person. So what we're saying here is, we open our thoughts that are usually subconscious as well. That's the idea that's being expressed here. How to really work on controlling our thoughts. Well, as you saw, you can control your breath, you can control your thoughts. Didn't say it's easy. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, please?
That's what we're here for, absolutely.
When I daven, because I don't understand the prayer of language, or the language of prayer rather, my mind wanders and I fight all the time to bring it back to the level of where I'm trying to concentrate. And this is a problem that I have.
Stay tuned. We're going to discuss that.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is all part of our discussion of what we're going to do. And I want to get to some of those ideas. And hopefully still today, we only have about, what's the time? 11:15. So 15 more minutes for today's shiur. So we'll probably get more to that in tomorrow. But there was a famous Chabad chassid named Reb Shlomo Freidis. He lived some time ago, I don't know, sometime in the last century. And his daughter married the son of one of the Rebbes, I think of the Tzemach Tzedek. Now, he wrote a letter to his mechutin, to the Tzemach Tzedek, in which he expressed his worries about his own declining health, and he related that he felt powerless but to pray to God that he remove the mental anguish. He was feeling, I guess, as people age, unfortunately, sometimes we get these feelings of hopelessness maybe because he's feeling like what's going on. And he says, this is what he wrote to the Tzemach Tzedek. I want to read the Tzemach Tzedek's response to you. The Tzemach Tzedek wrote a fascinating letter in response to him. And he criticizes Reb Freidis. He says, you're just relying on prayer. You think prayer is your only answer? And he provided a very practical technique to overcome his mental struggles based on this idea of changing your thoughts. Okay? So let me read this letter to you. It's a little bit long, but bear with me, okay? It says, it's in Hebrew, so I'm going to try to translate along the way. Okay? It says, V'af im mefached b'livay. Even if we are emotionally afraid, we are still able to separate our thought, speech, and action from that emotion of fear that the person has. The essential thing, he says, is not to contemplate. Leo, you listening? This is a little bit of the Tzemach Tzedek's advice to somebody else who had the same question as you. Not to contemplate, not to focus on the negativity, not to discuss that fear. Ella letzad hahifuch. But to do the exact opposite. Immediately upon letting go of the thought entirely, if you could eliminate, if you could stop focusing on the negative, then the fear will dissolve on its own. At the very least, the very least, it will become instantly dormant and not felt in the body. You have to be willing to allow your mind to not focus on the negative. You'll see that over the course of a few days, it will completely dissolve to the point that will not enter your mind at all. Meaning the negativity will dissolve and resolve your problem. Okay, he says as follows. Why is it that removal of the thought leads to this solution, that the fear will be removed? That is because emotions are entirely reliant on our dad, our intellectual focus, our mind. By focusing, by using your mind to focus on something, your mind is focused on the negative, he says to him. Okay, it requires active thought. And therefore, once you remove that thought, that negative thought, then if you remove that thought, okay, then the intellectual power of your mind is withdrawn from the emotion, from that feeling, with the result that the emotion ceases to be activated. So how will you control your feelings? Do you know that the word machshava, if you scramble the letter, you will get the word bisimcha. So how do you change a negative thought? By being happy. And he says a little further, it is worth training yourself to remove all marashchera. You know what marashchera is? Negativity. That negative mindset. Marashchera. I know my Hebrew is an anglicized. אני לא יכול לדבר טוב בעברית. מה אני יכול לעשות? He says, שיש לאדם לסלק הפחד מליבו. For we must rid ourselves from all fear, including justifiable fear. Justifiable fear? Leo, I'm sorry, I'm using your example, but you asked this question. And that's why I'm reading you this letter of the Tzemach Tzedek to his Mechutin. And he says to him, yes, I understand you have a justifiable fear, but you have to work on eliminating it. And he says, this is certainly true in your case, where there's nothing to worry about whatsoever, thank God. He's trying to relax. In terms of your health and your financial situation, again, the letter goes on and on. He obviously knew his Mechutin. He obviously knew what he was about. And the point is, if we are consciously aware of our thoughts, we could stop thinking about what we don't want to. Okay, we could cut our attention to the problem. Yes, it's going to require focused attention.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
is it not hiding your head in the sand like an ostrich if you're running away from a fear or a problem?
No, it doesn't mean you should ignore the problem, but it means that you have to put yourself into the right mindset to deal with the problem. Because, I'll give you an example. About 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, my mother fell ill. I was actually in California at the time, and I was rushing into New York to be there with her, and I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't stop crying. I thought my mother will be around, will live forever. And my mother, she was diagnosed with a very rare disease called aplastic anemia, and her blood cells were constantly being depleted, and she needed transfusions, and she had no hemoglobin. It was a very dire state. But my mother had the right mind to say to me, crying is not going to help. Crying is just going to bring us all down. You want to do something about it? Say Tehillim, talk to the doctors, do some medical research. Let's try to find a solution. So it's not hiding your head in the sand. Crying, if it hurts, you cry. But crying is not the solution. Okay, you have to actually do something more than just crying. You have to you have to do something more. And let me tell you something the Rambam writes in Mishnah Torah. And he says that the sin of being afraid is allowing your thoughts to focus on the fear. Okay? Remember that verse I told you, Mi ha'ish hayara verach halebav, when it talks about going out into battle. The person, if you go out to war, if a soldier is feeling weak-hearted, he is a threat to everyone else. He needs to be discharged from the military. Rambam says there, a person who's overwhelmed, overcome with fear during a battle, is actually transgressing a commandment of the Torah. So it's a sin to fear, because it's going to cause that panic amongst your fellow soldiers. Okay, and it's actually a verse in the Torah that I read to you yesterday. The verse, Al Yerech Levavchem, do not let your hearts fear. Al Tiru, do not be afraid. The Al Tachpazu, Al Tartzu Mipneim, do not be afraid of them. Do not, right? What does Mordechai tell the kids in the Purim story? Al Tira Mipachat Pisam, do not be afraid of sudden danger. This is something you have to be clear about. And there's a very famous story, you've heard it from me many, many times. The story of Rav Moshe Meisels. For those who haven't heard it, you'll hear. For those who haven't heard it, you hear it the first time. For those who've heard it, you'll hear it again. Rav Moshe Meisels of Vilna. He was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe over 200 years ago. And he once said that this principle of machshava, of moach shalit al alev, this idea, this fundamental concept of the mind controlling the heart, he said it actually saved his life. And the story he told was, he was multilingual. He was fluent in many languages. And he was recruited as a spy in the French army, meaning for the Russians. He was giving information back to the Russians. Now this takes us back a little bit in history, because when there was a war between Napoleon and the Tsar, most rabbis and Jews supported Napoleon. Napoleon was pro-Jewish. Napoleon was supporting liberty, freedom for Jews. The Alter Rebbe opposed him. The Alter Rebbe felt that freedom of religion, unfortunately, would translate into freedom from religion. Like I said yesterday, 30 years ago, the Rebbe suffered a debilitating stroke. And the very last mimer the Rebbe gave out, the very final discourse, was a discourse called V'ata Tetzaveh, on the Parsha we read 2 weeks ago. And he talks there about, just as what you squeeze an olive, what do you get out? Olive juice, oil. You squeeze a Jew, you get out the juice. And the same thing, he said, is that when Jews are squeezed, and he was talking then specifically about Jews living in the Iron Curtain, under the oppressive Soviet regime. And there they did everything, people underground. And I know friends of mine I'm in touch with. I have a friend who came from Russia. Okay, I only met him in New York. He said in Russia, they literally risked their life, where religious practice was forbidden, to observe Judaism. What happened to him in America? His first few years, this guy was a devoutly committed Yid. Always in shul, always involved. He's a clever guy. Back in Russia, they were poverty-stricken. He started going to university, started to do well financially. Let me tell you today, he doesn't have the same beard. I think he's still a committed Jew. Just not the same as he was. So what happened? In Russia, where he was being forced, he had no freedom of religion. He fought for his religious beliefs. But unfortunately, he came to America, he had freedom from religion. That was the Alter Rebbe's fear of Napoleon. And because of the Alter Rebbe's fear of Napoleon, because of that, he actually actively supported the Russians and encouraged his disciples to fight on the Russian side. And this Rav Moshe Meisels, who was a linguist, he was deployed by the Russians as a spy against the French. And he describes how one time he was in a room where they were debating a certain military strategy, when suddenly Napoleon himself burst into the room and said, "There's a spy amongst us." And he started checking everyone's pulse. Imagine. And he came to Rav Moshe, placed his hand on Moshe's chest to feel how hard his heart was pounding. And guess what? Rav Moshe said at that moment, This concept, he called it the Aleph of Chassidus, stood by me. He said, my mind commanded my heart to beat not an increment faster. This was his saving grace. He said, this very idea of moach shalit al alev, to have my mind control my feelings, my emotions. He says the commanders of the emperor, he told Napoleon, they took me as an interpreter, as I'm knowledgeable in languages, and that's crucial to fighting the wars. He was a spy for the Russians, a religious Jew. He was accused of espionage, which he really was a spy. And Napoleon let him go. Napoleon knew there's spies amongst them. But they thought of him as an interpreter. He was able to control his pounding heart. So the easiest way to control a negative feeling is combating your thoughts. Just as you could change from a negative thought to a positive thought. Okay, not so easy, but you can do it. We say the same thing, you can control your heart. And unlike our mental and emotional capacities, which are difficult to change, we all have the ability to exercise control over our thoughts. And by doing so, we change our thoughts from being products of the mind and heart to controlling them, directing their focus. That's the objective, that's the goal that we want to achieve. Now for your question, Mervin, about the distractions in prayer, that we'll have to address tomorrow. Mañana. In Russian we say zavtra. Okay, ladies and gents, thanks for joining us today. Please God, we'll be right back, right here tomorrow. Just please bring some more friends to join along, whether in person here at Chabad House or here on Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook.
So, Rabbi,
Yes, Leo.
there's a Yiddish saying which goes, tracht gut, wird sein gut.
Exactly. Thank you so much for that. Tracht gut wird sein gut. Think positively, and it will all be good. Tomorrow morning, right here, same place, same time, 10 a.m., Senior Citizens Shir with lunch, right here at Chabad House. Zayka Zant.